coming up on Bridge City News. Less than a week into the new school year, one Lethbridge High School already confirms a positive case of COVID-19. Plus, a Lethbridge home builder steps up following a case of vandalism at the Lethbridge Food Bank. And it's a sure sign of fall. Today is the last day for the outdoor downtown farmers market.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Rocher.
Hello and thanks for joining us. A known drug house and bike chop shop was shut down today in North Lethbridge. Members of the Alberta Safer Communities and Neighborhoods, or SCAN unit, were on the site of the home in the 300 block of 20th Street North this afternoon.
These criminals were going around the community and pretty much taking anything that wasn't nailed down. The Lethbridge Police Service worked extensively on this property and worked alongside SCAN to get to the result we're at today.
This place has been an oasis of crime for the past 2 years. So it's nice to see it finally get to this stage, and we're not just going to walk away from the neighborhood. This neighborhood has really bound together and stood up to these people and said, not here, not now. It's been very cool to see. And we will continue to support them with whatever needs they have.
There's 3 warrants in approximately the last year and a half, and they're seizing drugs, bikes. This is what's referred to as almost a high-end bike shop, because they're cutting bikes. There were bike parts everywhere. There's still bike parts left all over the yard. But this is a haven for stolen bikes.
The Lethbridge School Division confirmed that there is a case of COVID-19 at Chinook High School. No details yet if it's a staff member or a student. Officials at the school are working with Alberta Health Services on contact tracing. Anyone who came into contact with the infected person is being told to quarantine for 14 days. In a release earlier today, the Lethbridge School Division said AHS is in charge of notifying the close contacts impacted by positive COVID-19 cases in our community. Yesterday's City Council meeting proved to be an exciting one when nearly 100 anti-mask protesters walked into Council chambers prior to the meeting. The group was protesting the mandatory mask bylaw set by Council 2 weeks ago. One protester says she's concerned about mask wearing, especially when it comes to her grandkids going back to school.
I find that the masks against the kids, especially when they have to wear them all day long, I think that there's a lot of data that shows that that's going to present some long-term health effects that are negative. I have grandchildren in school, and I just refuse to allow them to wear the mask simply to pacify some people's fears. The fact that some kids come home with the other kids' masks, there's no one policing all of this. There's actually more risk of them getting other people's germs because of these masks than without them. It really doesn't make a lot of sense.
The bylaw that says residents must wear a mask in all public facilities will be reviewed at the end of December. About a month ago, the Lethbridge Food Bank fell victim to an incident of vandalism. Their windows were smashed by heavy rocks, causing damage worth a couple $1,000s. Today, those windows are being replaced by a Lethbridge home builder. BCN's Loris Alexander has the story.
Today is the final, basically, installation of the windows that were vandalized a few weeks back.
And stepping up to help with that is Strandville Living Master Builder.
Like many people, we saw the online story about the windows getting vandalized over the August long weekend, and we're very close to this office, where our business is just a couple blocks from here, and so we decided to come by and assess the damage and see how we could get involved.
Strandville Living installed graphics on 3 brand new tempered glass panels.
Strandville Living approached us and wanted to take care of the expenses that are involved with the window replacement as well as the deck.
We're just happy to be involved as a local business, and during challenging times, of course, we look at it as our business reaching out to a business or a nonprofit in town that during a really tough time we can help out. We're happy to do so.
For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
Thank you, Loris. The Alberta Birds of Prey Foundation specializes in the rescue and recovery of injured birds, but they're now closed to the public for the season. As Micah Quinn explains, the foundation says they've had a tough time due to the COVID-19 pandemic over the summer, but there was still a ton of positive reaction from the community.
Birds of Prey have taken their final flight of the year for the public at the Alberta Birds of Prey Foundation.
So basically what happens, and the reason sadly we have to close on Labor Day Monday, is many of our summer students have to return to school. So we go from a staff of about 15 to 20 people down to 3, and it's just virtually impossible for us to stay in the same visitor-ready state of readiness for visitors to come through. So sadly, that's why we don't open longer than Labor Day weekend.
Due to the challenges of COVID-19, the foundation lost a considerable amount of money.
Yeah, well, combined with the income we lost from being open for visitors, and another thing we do is traveling bird displays around the province, like places like Calgary, Banff, Lake Louise, Edmonton, we might have lost in a neighborhood of well over $100,000, maybe closer to $150,000.
Weir says the positive responses from families was worth it when they came out.
It was also a very uplifting time for us. People genuinely appreciated the fact we were open, because there's so many places that weren't open for visitors, for example.
Weir says that the foundation is still looking after the birds, even though they are close to the public.
Caring for these injured creatures and then sharing them with visitors and young people is my purpose, one of my, kind of big callings in life, I'll put it that way. And so rain or shine, doesn't matter how little money comes in for donations, we're still here looking after the birds every day of the year regardless.
The Alberta Birds of Prey Foundation is still accepting donations. For more information or to donate, you can visit their website or call the number on screen. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Thank you, Micah. With summertime passing us by, the Wednesday Farmers Market was open for one final time. Exhibition Park organizers say that the pandemic didn't affect foot traffic or sales this year, which is positive for vendors during difficult economic times.
It is important. I mean, that is pretty much the economic backbone of Southern Alberta. It's just it's great that we can be an outlet for them. The vendors were very happy to have the thing. I mean, for the most part, there's such a lack of outlets for them this year that to have the markets running, yeah, it was a big deal to them. For the most part, people are grateful that there is a downtown market, because there was the chance that it was never going to happen, especially between COVID and construction. It got sort of slapped together short notice, but yeah, very positive. Like, people really, really enjoy it.
The farmers market on Saturdays at Exhibition Park will be open until Halloween. The local chapter of Big Brothers Big Sisters unveiled recent upgrades to BCN today. Much of it is thanks in large to donation from the Rotary Club of Lethbridge. BCN's Naveen Day has the story.
The dust has barely settled inside the Lethbridge office of Big Brothers Big Sisters. That is because of a $563,000 makeover that was partly made possible by grants from corporate and community donors, namely the Rotary Club of Lethbridge. President of the club, Alan Friesen, tells us why the Rotary Club's donation of $100,000 was so important.
What Big Brothers and Big Sisters does is a huge, huge value for the kids that they're helping, but also for our community in general. The kids that get the help they need, they're going to be able to have the best lives possible. They're going to be able to be happy and healthy and productive and be contributors, volunteers in our community. So that's a huge investment now for them now, but on the long term, perhaps for the rest of their life.
I always say we're busting at the seams. Our staff were sitting on top of each other pretty much. We served 686 kids last year. And with that, we have lots of people coming in and out of the building. And we just didn't have enough space to continue to grow how we want to grow and to offer the best possible mentoring programs that we could.
The upgrades have added an extra 1,000 square feet of usable space. Visser says it is much needed to tackle the growing wait list of littles waiting for their bigs.
Right now, there are 49 children waiting in just one program, and that's our community-based mentoring program. That's the one where a big takes a child out in the community for 2 to 3 hours a week. And that program has been the one that's been here since we started in 1973, and it has the biggest impact on kids. And having 49 kids waiting, some of these kids wait an average of 1 year to have a mentor because matches are based on compatibility. Because at the end of the day, we want every single match to be happy, safe, and successful.
For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
Thank you, Naveen. The Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation has made its first commitment, backing 6 First Nations acquiring an equity stake in the $1.5 billion Cascade Power Project, a 900-megawatt combined cycle natural gas power plant near Edson.
900-watt state-of-the-art power plant will meet 8% of Alberta's total electricity needs when it's commissioned. Construction begins immediately, and I know was announced recently, and will be completed by the fall of 2023. The project is expected to create 600 jobs during peak construction, and more than 25 long-term operational jobs, and this is including construction and operational jobs for skilled Indigenous workers employed by First Nations contractors.
The Alberta government says it will spend $20 million over 3 years to improve access to palliative care. Health Minister Tyler Shandro says his government is committed to high-quality end-of-life care for patients and their families. $6 million is going to the Covenant Health Palliative Institute and the Alberta Hospice Palliative Care Association, with $19 million still to be decided. The province has also eliminated co-payments for end-of-life drugs needed by about 2,700 Albertans who choose to die at home or in a hospice. A man accused of killing a family doctor at a clinic in central Alberta made a bizarre court appearance today. Dang Mabor went on several tirades against the judge when asked if he understood the charges against him. Mabor said repeatedly that the court should ask him why he killed his family doctor, then added it was for good reason. Mabor is charged with first-degree murder in the death of 45-year-old Dr. Walter Reynolds at the Village Mall walk-in clinic in Red Deer last month. A Calgary man who killed his daughter and seriously injured her best friend in a drunk driving crash has been sentenced to more than 5 years in prison. Michael Sean Bomford was found guilty in January of dangerous driving, causing death and bodily harm, as well as causing the 2016 crash while impaired. Court heard Bomford had 3 times the legal limit of alcohol in his system while driving his 17-year-old daughter Megan and her friend Kelsey Nelson. We Charity says it's closing its Canadian operations as the organization is in dire financial straits. Co-founders Craig and Mark Keilberger will also step down once the transition to a new board of governors is complete. We has lost many of its corporate sponsors since the controversy over the Liberal government's plans to have the youth organization run a multi-million-dollar student volunteer program. We plans to lay off its Canadian staff in the coming months and sell all of its property in Canada. It will create an endowment fund that will pay for the completion of several projects in Latin America, Asia, and Africa that are still underway. The decision does not immediately affect WE's British and U.S. operations. The latest numbers from the Parliamentary Budget Office says Canada's debt is now over $1 trillion and the deficit is over $340 billion. Political reporter Brian Lilly says this Liberal government is nothing like the Chrétien Liberals. He says the Trudeau Liberals really don't mind running huge deficits.
They were going to have 3 small deficits, $10 billion a year, and they blew past that as if it didn't matter. And they went to 30 billion. Instead of 30 billion over 3 years, it was $30 billion deficit a year. And they didn't care. This is a government that is not the Jean Chrétien, Paul Martin type liberal. You know, those guys don't exist anymore. This is a liberal party that thinks the NDP wants to move too slowly in terms of government spending.
Brian will also discuss how the Liberals have also signed a Chinese company to provide security at Canadian embassies. That is coming up in the second half of our show. Erin O'Toole addressed his party's MPs and senators in a meeting earlier today. The new Conservative leader laid out a new mission statement for his party and urged Canadians to take a fresh look at what they represent.
By working together, Canadians have always overcome adversity. So too will our Conservative caucus. Through respect, professionalism, and the pursuit of excellence, we will show all Canadians that we are a government in waiting.
And Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder reflected on her first caucus meeting with Conservative leader Erin O'Toole. Harder says her party's main priority right now is showing compassion.
We know that Canadians are hurting. We know that millions of jobs have been lost. We know that many families have been hurt. We know that it's been difficult to make ends meet. Particularly, my heart goes out to my fellow Albertans, where about 25% of the population has actually deferred their mortgage payments. Again, hundreds of thousands of jobs have been lost, and families are wondering how they're going to pay their bills and make ends meet. And so as we care for Canadians from coast to coast, as we reach out to you and hear your ideas, as we seek your feedback and to learn from your experiences, we hope that you will engage with us on a day-to-day basis.
And south of the border, massive wildfires are burning huge areas of California, Oregon, and Washington, destroying homes, closing roads, and forcing evacuations. A wildfire in central California overran a fire station and injured some firefighters on Tuesday.
So far, the Critic incident has burned 143,929 acres. The containment remains at 0%, and we should have over 1,000 firefighters working on the incident right now, with more en route and more resources being ordered to come help out with this incident.
So there have been some homes destroyed as well as some outbuildings. We have damage assessment teams that are arrived at the fire today.
And luckily, we haven't been affected by the smoke here from those fires. Instead, it was another nice day in southwestern Alberta, and the summer-like conditions will continue over the next couple of days. Full weather details are coming up after the break. Stay with us. We had lots of sunshine again today, but slightly cooler temperatures. Tonight, it should be mainly clear with a low near 4. Tomorrow, sunny with a high near 25 degrees. Lots of sunshine again on Friday with a high of 27. A low pressure system moves in on Saturday, though, bringing lots of clouds with the temperature cooling off to 16. Sunday, back to more sunshine with the temperature increasing to a balmy 28 degrees. Monday, a mix of sun and cloud and a high near 24. Tuesday, the rain clouds return with a high of only 15. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 21 degrees with an average low of 6. Highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1981 at 32 degrees. Our record low was -1 in 1959. Sunrise was at 6:59 a.m. and our sunset this evening will be at 7:58 p.m. Looking at tomorrow's national forecast now, expect lots of sun with a high of 26 in both Victoria and Vancouver, sunny and 25 in Calgary on Thursday, just a few clouds and 25 as well for Edmonton. Partly cloudy and 24 for Saskatoon, mainly sunny and 25 for Regina tomorrow. It should be mainly sunny and 23 in Winnipeg, overcast and 19 for Toronto. Expect a chance of showers with a high near 18 in Ottawa. Showers and 21 for Montreal, a slight chance of rain and 26 for Fredericton. A chance of showers or drizzle and 25 for Halifax, rain and 26 for Charlottetown, and in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect a mainly cloudy day with a high near 19. A class action lawsuit is being launched against Toronto Dominion Bank over its refusal to pay travel insurance claims for trips canceled as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The statement of claim filed in Ontario Superior Court says TD turned down a $6,700 claim by a man who canceled his family's flight to Italy along with their Mediterranean cruise. The bank cited the travel credit available to him for the flights and cruise in their refusal. His lawyer says many Canadians are experiencing similar frustrations with travel insurers, arguing vouchers make a poor replacement for reimbursement given by the uncertainty around the travel and health over the next couple of years. The Bank of Canada says that while third quarter bounce back activity seems to be faster than it anticipated in July, trouble could lie ahead. It says indicators like an uneven rebound in employment and subdued business confidence point to a slow and choppy COVID-19 recovery. The central bank announced today that it's keeping its key interest rate on hold at 0.25% and says the rate won't budge until inflation is back on target. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 284 points today to finish at 16,383. The Dow was up 439 to 27,940. The S&P 500 was up 67 to 3398, and the Nasdaq was up 293 points to 11,141. Oil was up $1 to $37.76 per barrel. Natural gas was unchanged on the day at $2.40. Gold was also unchanged at $19.46.84 an ounce, and silver was down a cent to $26.97 an ounce. Wheat is at $223 per metric ton, barley's at $215, canola's at $4.76, and corn is at $242 per metric ton. Live cattle were down $1.08 to $104.70, feeder cattle were down $1.60 to $138.25, and lean hogs were up $1.48 on the day to finish at $61.38. The Canadian dollar was down slightly on the day to 76.06 US.
And recapping one of our top stories today, the Lethbridge School Division confirmed that there's a case of COVID-19 at Chinook High School. No details yet if it's a staff member or a student. Officials at the school are working with Alberta Health Services on contact tracing. Anyone who came into contact with the infected person is being told to quarantine for 14 days. The national debt is now over $1 trillion and rising. According to one of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly, spending by the Trudeau Liberals will not ease up anytime soon. Mr. Lilly will have details in an interview with BCN's Hal Roberts shortly. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Seniors Golf is held every Tuesday and Thursday at Evergreen Golf Center. Come for a fun 9-hole game. Cost is $11 per person, and golfers must supply their own clubs. For more information and to book your tee time, call 403-329-4500. The Centre for Suicide Prevention is hosting their third annual Run for Life on Sunday, September 27th. Run for Life is a virtual event this year. Anyone who is passionate about suicide prevention is welcome to join for a virtual journey from darkness into light. Walk or run to remember your loved one and raise awareness for suicide prevention. For details, visit Centre for Suicide Prevention Facebook page and follow the events link. Get out and explore nature. The Helen Schiller Nature Centre is offering guided 1-hour field trips for all ages. Visit lethbridge.ca/things to do. Click on Nature Centre and follow the events page, where you'll find a list of featured tours that will introduce you to amazing plants and animals found right here in Lethbridge. Cost is $25. Book online for your tour today. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
Our country's chief public health officer, Dr. Theresa Tam, says she's concerned about a 25% rise in COVID-19 cases here in Canada. Ontario saw a big spike in cases just as schools returned. To discuss this in more detail is one of our regular contributors, Mr. Brian Lilly, joining me once again from Toronto. Brian, is a lot of the country headed back towards a lockdown?
I don't think so, not on any national scale, and even a province like Ontario that's seeing an unfortunate rise in the numbers. Based on my discussions with public health officials, with the Premier, listening to what they're all saying in their news conferences, I think that if there is any sort of lockdown, it would be more of a regional type basis, where you say, okay, there There's a real problem in this specific area. We're going to deal with that, because even within Ontario, 14.7 million people, biggest population in the country, it was 190 cases on new cases on Labor Day Monday that would have been reported, and then 185 on the Tuesday that kids went back to school. Now that's important because schools were shut down in Ontario on March 13th when there were only 155 cases being reported. And so I put it to the top public health doctor. I said, well, why are you opening when there's more cases now than then? He said, because at that point we were going from 20 cases to 60 cases to 100 to 155. He said the growth was exponential. Now we're seeing, after going down below 100 in the province, going back up to 150 to 200 in that range. But it tends to be people who are between 20 and 30. More than 50% of the cases recently were people between 20 and 40. So not the prime group that they tend to worry about. But they are also geographically located. So, Toronto, Brampton, the suburb just outside of Toronto, and Ottawa. And then within that, there are clusters. There was one church in North Toronto that had a bunch of cases. It was basically a spot for an outbreak. There was a wedding in Brampton where a whole bunch of people got infected. It's not wide community spread, and that's why the public health officials are concerned, but not ready to say we're going into lockdown, which I'm not sure an awful lot of the public would appreciate any longer.
You have been a harsh critic of how the Public Health Agency of Canada handled the pandemic in the beginning. Now the health minister has ordered a review of their pandemic review system because of its failure?
Yeah, a lot of concern being raised by scientists within the Public Health Agency of Canada. They said that their voices were muzzled, that they weren't heard as they tried to send warning signals up the chain of command. Now remember, the Trudeau Liberals were elected saying we won't be like Stephen Harper, we're going to listen to scientists. And well, it turns out that maybe they didn't. There were problems. There was a lot of problems with how the Public Health Agency of Canada handled this from the start. I've said from the beginning that the two weak points in our entire response have been provincially, in British Columbia, Ontario, and Quebec especially, it's been long-term care facilities, that people were hit hard there. Federally, their response was weak early on in the border and having appropriate PPE. They didn't want to close the border. They ignored warnings that this was coming here. They didn't have the National Emergency Strategic Stockpile. And now this report that there were warnings given to the government from inside the Public Health Agency. We're not talking about the Defense Department report that maybe they ignored. We're talking about within the Public Health Agency, people were sounding the alarm and officials weren't listening. So it's a bad look for the government, and more that needs to be investigated in terms of what they knew and when. Should they have been acting earlier? I think the end results or where we ended up would say yes, they should have been.
Brian, the pandemic has impacted hundreds of thousands of business owners across Canada. So many have either had to lay off staff, they've been laid off themselves because they're working for a company, or received reduced hours during the pandemic. A report from the Angus Reid Institute says low-income Canadians are especially feeling pessimistic about their economic future. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, twice as likely, especially for people making $25,000 a year or less, to say that their economic fortunes have gone down this year. A small percentage, I think it was about 25%, said, yeah, things have gone better for me this year. That's not the experience of most Canadians. Most Canadians have seen things, you're either losing hours, laid off, worried about you or a loved one being laid off. And this report shows that it is primarily people at the low end. And when you think of the last sectors of the economy to open back up, regardless of where you are in Canada, well, it tends to be places, industries like tourism, hospitality, restaurants, hotels. Yeah, they're back open, but talk to the workers, talk to the owners. I know of one hotel group in small town Ontario where in the summer they rely on an awful lot of tourism. There were nights when their hotel would have one guest, one room at certain points. And then even as things open back up, I remember talking to Lisa MacLeod, who's our tourism minister in Ontario. And I said, yeah, I'm hearing hotels are sold out. And they said, well, yes and no. They're sold out for what they can reasonably open and accommodate. So maybe they can only accommodate 25% of their usual business. They're sold out of that 25%. These are the industries that have been hurting. These are industries that don't, at the bottom end, don't have a lot of pay, whether you're talking about waitresses, cooks, housemaids. Then those are the people that the Angus Reid Institute survey is really showing are feeling the economic impacts of this pandemic. It's not civil servants sitting at home, some of whom have been working, even more hours. Some of them are my family members, but others are really feeling the pinch.
I've heard that as well from a lot of business owners. What's interesting, though, I just got back from a trip to Vancouver Island. The hotel that we stayed at in Victoria, jam-packed. Not an empty room in the house. I couldn't believe it. I thought, what's going on here? During the pandemic, not a problem at all. Like, it was just for them. They're making money hand over fist, which was surprising to me, right?
Very few cases on Vancouver Island. It's been one of the standouts in British Columbia in terms of how they've handled it.
Brian, our country's deficit and debt just keeps climbing and climbing and climbing. The debt now over $1 trillion. The Feds have seen their credit rating cut due to the size of the deficit, over $300 billion. The PBO, or the Parliamentary Budget Officer, says the current deficit is simply unsustainable.
Yeah, and this is a frightening report where he says, look, because of all the discussions about the government doing their, Build Back Better program, their Green New Deal, all of that, there's talk of them having ongoing spending. Well, he says, look, you can't do that for more than a few years. And by a few, he said, I mean 1 or 2 at most. We're talking about a deficit this year of $343 billion. I remember when the entire federal budget used to be a lot smaller than that, and it wasn't that long ago, Hal. So it's concerning. We all understand that when the government shuts down the economy, they do have a responsibility to step in and help those who they have displaced. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be doing that, but at a certain point, you've got to open the economy back up. You've got to let people get back to work safely, but they have to get back to work. The way this government is talking, well, we might not see people back to work, and they might be paying them not to. To talk of a universal basic income, which will decimate those industries that don't pay a lot because they won't be able to get workers. So, I think this warning from the Parliamentary Budget Officer is one the government should heed. Unfortunately, I'm not sure they will.
How will this deficit concern affect plans being leaked out ahead of the throne speech later this month to build back better and change our economy?
I don't think it will, because remember, this is a government that was elected in the first time in 2015. They were going to have 3 small deficits, $10 billion a year, and they blew past that as if it didn't matter. And they went to 30 billion. Instead of 30 billion over 3 years, it was $30 billion deficit a year. And they didn't care. This is a government that is not the Jean Chrétien, Paul Martin type liberal. Those guys don't exist anymore. This is a liberal party that thinks the NDP wants to move too slowly in terms of government spending. They have been telegraphing that they want to do an awful lot of social spending, a national daycare program, a national pharmacare program, a universal basic income. I think that they're going to use this crisis to try and bring in all kinds of, quite frankly, socialist economic reforms that they wouldn't be able to get through in any regular time period. And the public may buy it, or at least a certain portion of the public, because I understand people are uncertain. They're scared. So, and we're not in the 1990s anymore. People aren't scared about the idea of deficits. So, sitting there and talking about, well, we've got to get back to balance. That doesn't win over voters anymore. That's not where the headspace is at. And, quite frankly, any conservative that's going to try and get elected saying, I'll balance the budget in so many years, and, that will not sell in this day and age.
New Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole has unveiled his shadow cabinet with some familiar faces, and Andrew Scheer got himself a shadow cabinet position. And Brian, Calgary MP Michelle Rempel got herself a promotion.
She's going to be the health critic or health shadow minister, however you want to put it. So I'm just waiting, because she is married to an American and she does spend some time in Oklahoma. I'm just waiting for all the critics saying, oh yeah, she got it so that she can bring in American style healthcare. I know that critique is going to come. I don't buy it, but I'm telling you, it will be there. So she's in that position. Two guys that did outstanding work all through the WE committees over the summer, Pierre Poilievre and Michael Barrett. They get to retain their roles. Michael Barrett is the critic for ethics. He's going to be a busy man. And Pierre Poilievre is still the finance critic, while Scheer is in charge of infrastructure. And an interesting choice for foreign affairs critic, and I'm quite impressed by this. Michael Chong is going to be in charge of foreign affairs. And interesting because of his family background. His parents, trying to remember from my conversations with Michael, I believe one parent came from Hong Kong, one parent came from Holland. They're in Canada. And Aaron O'Toole is someone who's taken a strong stand against the communist dictatorship in China. That's something that Michael's been very strong on for years. And he's going to do great in that role, I think.
Brian, there was a report that our country's embassies had struck a deal to upgrade their security gear, but that contract went to a Chinese company banned by the United States over security concerns and their ties to the Chinese Communist government. Now, you've heard from the CEO of a Canadian company on this. What are they saying?
They're saying that it's unbelievable that the Canadian government didn't see a national security threat here. The company that got the contract is called Nutech. The former chairman of the company is the son of Hu Jintao, who used to be the president of China. And all these ties to the Communist Party, to the Central Command. The Americans banned this company from installing airport X-ray machines under the Obama administration in 2014. This is not a Donald Trump says China's bad thing. No, this has been going on for close to a decade, concerns about this company. And so we signed this contract. Now the government says, oh no, there's been no contract signed. That's a semantics game. What went out was a call for suppliers, and only one was put on the standing offer sheet. So anytime that they need screening or X-ray gear for a Canadian embassy, they have to go to the standing offer list. Well, there's only one company on it right now, and it's all mobbed up with the Chinese government. So a company out of Montreal, Vita Detection, their CEO, Rory Olson, is saying, you've got to change this. And by the way, we want on that list. Now, there are other Canadian companies, and there's American companies, and there's British companies that also supply this equipment. It's not a big industry, but there are suppliers from within our allies. Why we would choose a company that's been called the Huawei of airport security, a company that's able to undercut Canadian, British, or American suppliers because the government of China subsidizes them to get them into these sorts of agreements, is beyond me. The government should simply walk away from this and go with one of the Canadian suppliers or from one of our allies. The reason that the Americans, by the way, are still on a campaign, as I said, started under the Obama administration, saying you can't install this equipment in the States. Since then, they've been on a campaign to try and get it out of European airports because they say that there is potential for passenger information to be sent back to Beijing. Imagine what they would do in our embassy.
Yeah, imagine. Now, Brian, it was in May that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said he was banning around 1,500 rifles from Canada to make our streets safer. A lot of farmers and ranchers I've spoken to across the prairies are not happy about it. Now, you've looked at the numbers, the hard numbers for one of the hot spots from gun crime, that being in Toronto. Has gun violence actually gone down in the big smoke?
No, it's gone up. And I only looked at the period between May 1st and September 6th, so the Sunday of the Labor Day long weekend. And, I'm trying to get data from other jurisdictions across the country. It's difficult, it's time consuming, but the Toronto police have a data portal that you can just go in and look at neighborhoods where the crime's happening, how it's happening. The shootings went up 12.5% between May 1st and September 6th compared to the same period the year before. If you want to compare this May 1st to September 6th, 2020 to to the same period in 2018, they went up 24%. And compared to the summer of 2015, just before Justin Trudeau was elected, 84% shootings have gone up. If these guns, if the AR-15s and these sorts of rifles were the problem, then his magical ban would have stopped the gun violence. But of course, that's not the issue here. The AR-15's not being used. The shotguns, and yes, they're adding shotguns and bolt-action rifles, hunting rifles to the list of banned firearms. These are not what gangsters are going around and shooting up Calgary or Ottawa or Vancouver or Toronto. They're using Glocks. They're using pistols. They're using .38 snub-nosed revolvers. That's what they like because they're easy to conceal. And as one former gangster told me, he said, you want to be able to conceal it and you want to be able to throw it away if you need to. You can't be doing that with a rifle without someone seeing you pick up this big thing and try and chuck it away. So it's we knew at the beginning that this was a ridiculous measure. Now we've got a full summer of stats showing that it's not working. The government's going to spend between $600 million and $1 billion to try and buy these firearms off of the current legal owners. Why not put that money into programs to deal with some of the root causes? Unemployment, a lack of opportunity, counseling, all things that, I doubt very many people would be against, to say, gun crime is a problem, we're going to deal with it at the root cause. Instead, they see gun crime and they just say, let's deal with the guns, the legal ones, not the crime. They forget about the crime.
Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, thanks again for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
Michael Zwagstra is a public high school teacher and author. He has extensive experience teaching a wide variety of grade levels and currently teaches high school in Manitoba, high school social studies. He has a new book out called The Naked Man Flees, and it's not exactly what you're thinking. Michael joins me now via Skype from Steinbach, Manitoba. Welcome back to BCN, Michael.
Well, thank you very much, Hal. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Now, you've previously written 2 books and articles on education policy. Why now have you decided to write a book about the Bible?
Well, the Bible has obviously been an area of interest of mine for a long time. And while I have written books on education policy, and that's what I'm well known for across the country commenting on, I'm also very passionate about the Bible. I believe that there's a lack of biblical literacy out there, not just among non-Christians, but frankly, even among many Christians, that we get a very superficial understanding where if you're relying just on popularized movies and maybe listening to some sermons and remembering what you learned in Sunday school, you're going to miss a whole lot of valuable information that's in the Bible and things that's worth learning. And so I decided it was time to write a book that pointed out some of these passages that commonly get overlooked and take a look at what they really mean.
Okay, we got to talk about this title, The Naked Man Flees. Makes a few people chuckle here. How did you come up with that name?
Well, the Naked Man Flees is also the title of one of the chapters, and it references a couple of verses in Mark chapter 14, verses 51 and 52. And that's the story of where Jesus has just been arrested by the guards, and he's about to be taken into custody. And it mentions that there was a young man who had been following behind, and the guards seized him, and he ran away, and he left his linen garment behind, and he ran away naked. And it's just this bizarre 2 verses. It appears only in the Gospel of Matthew, nowhere else in the Bible. We never see any direct reference to this man again. And a lot of people just miss that. They just go, well, what's this doing in here? And what I point out in my book is that actually there's a number of things we can learn from it. But one of the key things is, yeah, it's an odd event. It's the type of thing that you wouldn't expect a reference to a naked man running away to make it into a holy, sacred account regarding the arrest of the Son of God. But it is the type of thing you would expect to find in a real historical book describing what actually happened, and that the only reason for Mark to even put this in his gospel is because it happened. It's bizarre, it's strange, and it's yet powerful support for the veracity, for the truthfulness of the reporting that we find in the Gospels.
Michael, why is it that Christians and non-Christians alike tend to overlook certain parts of the Bible when they read it?
Well, there's a number of reasons, but the key thing is that our brains tend to go with what is most familiar. And so we get used to certain patterns, and we tend to look at things based on how we've commonly understood it. And so what that means is that we miss details that don't really fit with what we commonly understand. And you know, the book starts where I show a little triangle, and I ask people, what does it say within it? And most people who read this triangle will think it says Paris in the spring, but it actually doesn't. There's actually an extra word in there, an extra the, that almost everyone misses, because you're so used to seeing the phrase Paris in the spring, we miss that it actually says something a little extra. And it's similar when we look at our Bibles, that, you know, we know the story of Abraham and Moses and David, and it's so easy to miss the aspects of their character and their personalities that don't fit the popular narrative. And there's a lot of those things like that. And that's why Christians and non-Christians alike tend to miss these things when they're reading their Bibles.
Now let's talk a bit about Abraham. Your first chapter is titled, Abraham Shoos the Vultures Away. What are you discussing specifically in this chapter here?
Well, in Genesis chapter 15, God at one point is telling Abraham that he is going to inherit the land of Canaan. He's going to be the father of a great nation. And what happens is that Abraham then asks God, how can I know that this will be so? And instead of giving a straightforward answer, we see from verses 7 to 11, God telling Abraham to offer a sacrifice. And he has to bring a heifer, a goat, and a few other sacrificial animals. And then he has to cut them in half. And he then lays them on opposite sides from each other, and he walks in between them. And the passage then says in verse 11 that he shooed the vultures away until the evening. He actually kept the vultures from eating the carcasses. And then after that, we see the dialogue resume between God and Abraham. Now, again, because this is a famous chapter dealing with the great promise that God is giving to Abraham, we tend to gloss over this is a whole day that Abraham spent at this sacrifice. He not only had to bring these animals, he had to cut them in half. Think about the amount of gore and blood involved and how difficult it would have been for this old man to do this. And then he's walking in between them, and then he's keeping the vultures away. It's a powerful story of Abraham showing that his faith was real, that this following God's commands was so important that he was going to follow it exactly as God said. And he also knew, I can't just let the vultures come and eat the sacrifice that I've offered up to God. I have to protect them. And so he spent the day doing that. And it shows that, that he followed up his faith with good works. Because, of course, as we know as Christians, good works come about as a result of our faith. And Abraham demonstrated it in that section.
Now, another interesting chapter is called God Almost Kills Moses. Tell me more about that one.
Well, in Exodus chapter 4, most people know the story of Moses encountering God at the burning bush, and God telling him, you're going to be leading the Israelites out of Egypt. And Moses is then on his way back to Egypt. And then we know that afterwards that Moses meets Pharaoh and makes the demand. But in between, while he's in the wilderness, there are 3 verses 24 to 26, where it says that on his way back, God met Moses and was going to kill him, until his wife Zipporah took a flint knife and circumcised Moses' son right then and there. And as a result of that, God did not kill Moses. And we don't see that incident in the movie The 10 Commandments. You don't see it in Prince of Egypt, and you don't hear about it in a lot of sermons. But again, there's a lesson here. Moses didn't do something that was absolutely fundamental. He didn't circumcise his own son. There were a few things that were more disobedient among Jewish people at that time than to not circumcise their own son. And there was no way that Moses could lead the Israelites out of Egypt if that had been left unresolved. And so it's a reminder to us today that if you've been called into ministry, right, or to lead an organization, make sure you've taken care of the fundamentals first before you just go ahead and take that position. If you're going to be the leader of a pro-family lobby group, you better make sure your marriage is in good shape first. Take care of the fundamentals, just like Moses should have.
You know, it's funny, your book almost reminds me of a Cole's Notes version of the Bible. You know, the analysis and getting a little more in depth with it, and then maybe summarize it a little bit more. Now, your book, The Naked Man Flees, Michael, has 40 chapters, half about the Old Testament, the other half about the New Testament. I thought maybe you'd focus a little more on the New Covenant.
Yeah, I did this deliberately. I chose to And of course, 40 is the number of completion too, so there's that biblical reference. That's it. So it's a complete book. But I chose to go half and half because I want to make it clear that the Old Testament and the New Testament are equally important. Christians, it's tempting to skip the Old Testament and just go straight to the New Testament, and I understand why. The New Testament makes things more explicit and direct, but the Old Testament is where you find the foundations. It's the Old Testament that Paul is speaking about in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16, when he says that all Scripture is inspired by God. And so you can't really fully understand the New Testament if you don't read the Old Testament. And so I wanted to make sure in this book that I gave equal attention to both the Old and New Testament because they're both important for Christians today.
Now, do you believe that the stories you talk about in your book actually happened, or are they simply symbolic of a deeper spiritual meaning?
I believe the stories actually happened. Throughout the book, I take a high view of Scripture. So I believe that the incidents that have happened in regards to Abraham and Moses and all of the others, I believe they occurred as actually described within the Bible. Obviously, we have to read the Bible according to the genre that the different books are written in. I recognize that. But in the historical narrative where it's describing things that happened, whether it was the miracles that Jesus did or the events described in the Old Testament, I believe the appropriate thing to do as Christians is to take the Bible at its word. And so I do believe the stories happened as described.
So what benefit would Christians really receive from reading your book?
Well, I think Christians would hopefully gain a deeper appreciation for the Bible. And it's really easy sometimes to come to the idea that, I've kind of been there, done that. I'm pretty familiar with the Bible already. And we get bored in our Bible reading, in our devotions. And so this book is intended to shake people up a little bit and to make them notice, whoa, there's some parts of the Bible that I might have missed before. And I wonder how many other parts of the Bible I've been missing. Maybe I need to read the Bible a bit more carefully. Maybe I shouldn't just stick to the well-worn, one verse a day devotional guide, which tends to pick the easy verses with the obvious application. Maybe I should get back to reading the Bible itself and not skip over chapters that I think are difficult. And so I really hope that my book inspires people to take more time reading the Bible itself.
Now, you've also done media interviews about your book on secular radio stations. Why would non-Christians be interested in your book?
Yeah, I have done a number of interviews on some pretty major secular radio stations where the majority audience is non-Christian, and each of the hosts that interviewed me was definitely non-Christian. But I believe that non-Christians should read the Bible too, because obviously as a Christian, I want them to read it because I hope it brings them to faith in Jesus. But even before that, just to have a better understanding of our history and our culture, it makes sense to read the Bible and have some understanding of it. And one of the interviews I did was with a radio host who asked me a series of questions about the book. He had actually started his interview saying, "This is going to be interesting because I'm an atheist, and here I am talking about the Bible." And by the end of the interview, he had said, "You've convinced me. I'm going to get a copy of your book. Maybe I need to, as an atheist, start reading the Bible because there's some stuff in there that I need to become more familiar with." And so, if it could be a witness and to get more people to look at the Bible and not just have it sit on their shelves, then that's what I'm hoping happens.
Hey, did you follow up to see if this person gave their life to Christ?
Well, the interview was only last week, and so I don't think that it's going to happen quite that quickly. But I certainly would hope that does happen, and I do hope to be able to talk to him again. I am on that show on a fairly regular basis talking about education issues, and so I do want to look for opportunities to ask the question.
And you know what? At the end of the day, the seed has been planted, so that's wonderful. Now, some would say, "Hey, Michael Zwagstra, you're not a pastor. Why should I buy into this?" Do you have any theological training?
You're right. I'm not a pastor, and most of my obviously experience and training in education is in the field of education, including a master's degree in educational administration. But I also have a Master of Arts in Theological Studies from Liberty University, and I completed that degree about 4 years ago. And so I do have some academic training in the area of theology. And obviously I have my personal reading that I've done over the years and teaching, but I do have a master's degree in theological studies. And on a part-time basis, I do teach at Steinbeck Bible College as an adjunct professor, where I've taught courses on history and theology and ethics. And so I do believe I have some reasonable credentials in this area.
Now, where can people actually pick up a copy of your book, Michael?
Well, the simplest way to get it, because it's just out, would be to go to Amazon If you go to Amazon.ca and you type in "The Naked Man Flees," it'll pop up pretty quickly. Either that or type in my name and it'll come up pretty quickly there. And I do expect to start getting into some bookstores in the not too distant future. But obviously, right now, with everything being slowed down by COVID, the fastest way at this point, if you want to get a copy of the book, is just go to Amazon and type in the name of the book, "The Naked Man Flees," and it'll pop up pretty fast.
Could "The Naked Man Flees" be used as a private devotional or maybe in a Sunday school class? I bet you kids will probably get a kick out of that title.
Yeah, I believe it could. And the chapters are short. I mean, there's 40 chapters, and each chapter is about 1,200 to 1,500 words, and so it could be used as a devotional. In fact, one of the people I had involved in editing the book turned it into that as he was doing his editing. He said that as he would edit one chapter a day, and he said, "I just made it my devotional." And so that's where I sort of thought that, well, I wonder if maybe others could do that too. But it could also be a great book to use in Sunday school, both at the high school level and in an adult class. I think there could be some great discussion from it. I've taught adult Sunday school for many years, and these are the types of topics I can assure you that get people interested in discussions. And Sunday school is a great opportunity to do that. And I think this book could be a good resource for Sunday school classes.
Does your book try to settle long-standing theological scores such as Calvinism, the age of the earth, or infant versus adult baptism?
No, that is not the purpose of the book. I take an approach somewhat similar to C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity approach. I guess in this case, I'd sort of go with mere evangelical Christianity, because it is an explicitly evangelical book. It is in that regard, but I'm very clear in the book that I'm not getting into the mode and the time of baptism as part of the debate or the proper interpretation of Revelation. Those are important issues, and I think it's worthwhile for Christians to look into them and explore them. And I've got views on all of those, as do most Christians. But that's not the purpose of the book. The purpose of the book is to get people into the Bible and to get them thinking for themselves. And I'm not interested in settling theological scores. This is not going to be the book that resolves all those issues.
Teacher and author of the book "The Naked Man Flees," Michael Zwagstra, thanks for joining me today from Steinbach, Manitoba.
Well, thanks very much, Hal. It's been a pleasure.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.